The sky over France burned before the sun even rose. Thousands of ships and planes filled the horizon, carrying the hopes of a world at war. In a single morning, 156,000 men would face the impossible, storming the beaches of Normandy under a rain of fire. This was the day that would decide whether freedom lived or died. But how did they plan it? How did they survive it? And what really happened on the day the world called the longest day? Stay until the end. The truth is far more human than history books ever show. The sky hung heavy and gray over the English Channel. Waves rolled like restless giants beneath a fleet of steel. On the decks, young soldiers clutched rifles and letters from home, waiting for a signal that would decide the fate of the world. It was June 6, 1944, the day that would be remembered as the longest day. More than 156,000 Allied soldiers, carried by 7,000 ships and backed by 11,000 aircraft, were about to strike Nazi-occupied France. It was the largest amphibious invasion in history, a gamble that could end the war or destroy the Allied army in a single morning. What really happened on that day? How did ordinary men face impossible odds and survive the storm of steel waiting for them? And why did this single sunrise become the turning point of World War II? This is the story of D-Day, the day the tide turned. By 1943, Hitler's forces ruled almost all of Europe. France was crushed, Britain was isolated, and the Soviet Union was bleeding in the east. To win, the Allies had to open a Western front. But that meant one thing: an invasion. The plan, called Operation Overlord, demanded coordination across nations, seas, and skies. Britain's coasts turned into a giant war factory. Ships, tanks, and landing craft crowding every dock. The biggest challenge wasn't just crossing the water, there was surprise. If Germany guessed where they'd land, the invasion would fail before it began. So the Allies created a masterpiece of deception, Operation Bodyguard. They built fake armies of wooden tanks and dummy aircraft across southern England. Radio chatter hinted at an invasion far away at Calais. They even used General George Patton, Germany's most feared opponent, as bait to lead the Phantom Force. Hitler believed it. He shifted his panzer divisions north, leaving Normandy weaker. That lie and the courage behind it changed the war. Yet even with the odds tilted, success was not certain. Weather reports showed violent storms. Waves towered 10 feet high. Visibility was near zero. The invasion was delayed once. But on June 5th, after midnight, Eisenhower looked out the window, took a breath, and said 3 words. Let's go. Before dawn, the sky over France shimmered with parachutes. Thousands of airborne soldiers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions dropped behind enemy lines. Their mission: secure bridges, cut roads, and block German reinforcements. But strong winds scattered them miles off course. Many landed in flooded marshes and drowned. Others fell straight into enemy fire. Some units had just a handful of survivors. Still, they fought. Small groups of paratroopers linked up, ambushing patrols and cutting power lines. At Sainte-Mère-Église, American paratroopers captured the first French town to be liberated. Even as one man, John Steele, hung helplessly from a church steeple, pretending to be dead while the battle raged below. Hours later, the sea itself began to move. The horizon filled with gray shapes, destroyers, troop ships, landing craft. Engines thundered. Pilots checked watches. Soldiers gripped their helmets. Across the channel, one whisper ran through the ranks. This is it. The invasion zone stretched 50 miles along the Normandy coast. Each section had a code name: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. At Utah Beach, strong currents pushed American troops nearly 2 kilometers south of their target, a mistake that saved hundreds of lives. They met light resistance and advanced quickly. But at Omaha, the nightmare began. German bunkers carved into the cliffs overlooked the entire shoreline. When the landing craft opened, machine gun fire ripped through the first waves. Men dropped instantly. Those who survived dove for cover behind steel obstacles as shells exploded around them. Many boats sank before reaching the sand. Engineers trying to clear mines were torn apart. The tide dragged bodies back to sea. For hours, chaos ruled. Officers were dead. Radios jammed. Commanders had no idea who was alive. It seemed the invasion was collapsing before it began. Then small clusters of soldiers made a desperate move. Using bayonets and grenades, they crawled up the cliffs, inch by inch. By noon, they broke through the German lines, capturing the bunkers one by one. At a cost of over 2,400 casualties, Omaha Beach was finally secured. The men who survived called it Hell on Earth. Farther east, British and Canadian troops fought on Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. At Juno, the Canadians landed under heavy artillery but stormed inland faster than anyone expected. By nightfall, the Allies had carved a fragile foothold in France, one that would grow into liberation. The first victory was only the beginning. Behind the beaches lay a maze of Normandy hedgerows, thick earthen walls perfect for ambushes. German snipers hid among the trees. Tanks roared down narrow roads. Every field became a death trap. For weeks, the Allies fought yard by yard, losing thousands of men just to gain a few hundred meters. Villages like Caen, Corentin, and Saint-Lay were reduced to rubble, but the German army was stretched thin. Allied bombers destroyed supply lines, and resistance fighters sabotaged railways and bridges at night. Bit by bit, the tide shifted. On June 26th, Cherbourg fell. By July, the Americans had broken through the hedgerows. And by August, the Allied army had surrounded German forces near Falaise. A decisive victory that opened the road to Paris. It all began with that first day. That first step onto Normandy's blood-soaked sand. For those who lived it, D-Day was more than strategy. It was survival. Many soldiers were barely 20 years old. Some had never seen the ocean before they crossed it. Letters found later told of shaking hands and whispered prayers. One paratrooper wrote, "If I don't come back, tell my mother I did my best." Doctors worked in tents lit by lanterns, using seawater as plasma when supplies ran out. Priests offered last rites over the sound of explosions. The smell of smoke, fuel, and blood hung over the beaches for days. By nightfall, 4,400 Allied troops were dead and thousands more wounded. But the line held. Eisenhower had prepared 2 speeches before the invasion, one for success, one for failure. The second began, "Our landings have failed, and I have withdrawn the troops." He never had to read it. The victory at Normandy cracked open Hitler's fortress. From that beachhead, Allied armies poured into France, linking with Free French forces under Charles de Gaulle. By late August, Paris was liberated. Within a year, Germany surrendered. D-Day didn't end the war overnight, but it began the countdown. It showed that tyranny could be confronted, that unity could overpower fear. Every inch gained that day came from sacrifice, from men who carried 80-pound packs through surf and fire, who fought not for glory, but for the hope that someday no child would have to. The phrase, "the longest day," came from both sides. German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel called it that as he prepared his defenses. Afterward, Allied soldiers used the same words to describe what they'd endured. Hours felt endless. Every minute was life or death. If this story moved you, honor their courage by hitting like so more people remember what they fought for. Subscribe for more true stories that changed history.